and welcome to today's 411. Today is World Mental Health Day. We have with us our Director of Mental Health, Dr. Virginia Rubain. Welcome to the program, Dr. Rubain.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
What do we have on here going? You know, it's silly math, all about World Mental Health Day. Talk a bit about that before we get into the conversation.
Okay, so this year the theme is greater investment for greater awareness, and we wanted to raise awareness, particularly given the year that we've had, that it's so important that we invest into our mental health, specifically our wellness, and it's so important that we get assistance when we're not feeling well. So my wonderful team came up with a Don't Rush challenge using silly face masks. Last year we did silly hats. This year's silly face masks to take into consideration what's happening with us currently. And as you can see, I'm wearing my Minnie Mouse silly face mask, and you look like a princess.
Like a princess,
Yes.
Tasha.
Yes, Princess Tasha. So in celebration of World Mental Health Day, we have asked the community to make their silly masks and post to BVI-HSA's Facebook page to celebrate and raise awareness.
Definitely. And you know, I always like having you on the program. You have such a wealth of information and, you know, very vital information we need to get across to the public. You know, we're wearing these silly face masks, you know, to kind of make the topic of mental health a little bit more easier to digest.
Yes.
Right? Because it is a heavy subject. So,
It is.
So tell us why, you know, your department, why it's so important that we continue to shed light and raise awareness to mental health issues.
Well, I don't know for anybody else, but for me, this year has really driven home how important it is to be mentally well. We had significant periods of time where we were quarantined in our homes. Life as we know it is still not back to normal. And what has taken a beating collectively is our mental health, you know? And when you don't have your usual distractions and outlets for whatever energies or ailments that you have, it really drives home some of the things that you've been avoiding. And most of us could say, knock on wood, praise God, that we haven't been directly impacted by the COVID-19 virus. But for a lot of us, it forced us to take stock about where we are mentally. So those of us who have anxiety, depression, you know, interpersonal issues, a lot of relationships got exposed during this time, the health of the relationships or lack thereof. And the thing that I kept thinking while I was in my fortress of solitude is, you know, it doesn't matter how physically well you are. If this is not functioning the way that it should, it's all for naught. And so I think Corona has come to really drill down to us that just like how we have to take our blood sugar, just like how we have to check our blood pressure, we have to check in with what's happening up here too. Yeah, so that's been a huge takeaway for me.
Definitely. And as part of services offered not only by us here at BVI-HSA, but mainstream government on a whole, a lot went into keeping people's mental health in check. A lot of forums, a lot of access to mental health professionals, you know, were there for persons who wanted to use it. Now, in terms of our population, did we see an increase over this last few months, the pandemic period, of more mental health issues coming on the forefront?
I think it would be difficult to say yay or nay, because years ago when I just joined the service, all we had was the public service, but now we have a plethora of clinicians in the private sector. So if you're asking for a national figure, we don't have that. I wouldn't necessarily say that we had an uptick in persons developing mental health challenges. I would say we had an uptick in people utilizing services. So, you know, when before COVID, you could pretend like nothing was wrong. But with the deafening silence of COVID, you had to admit what was there. So I think what we've seen is that people are now more savvy. You talked about all the resources that the government has put into giving persons tools to cope, tools in order to explore themselves, and letting them know where services are available. I mean, I thought that was just wonderful. Here at Mental Health Services, we've been doing a series of weekly webinars for parents, for students, for teachers, for healthcare staff. And so there's definitely a higher level of investment because we recognize if your essential employees are not functioning mentally, you're in trouble.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I think we haven't really touched this topic, as much as I've interviewed you over the years, but I kind of wanted to talk a bit about the correlation between, mental health and substance abuse. Talk a bit about how substance abuse impacts mental health.
The first thing that we have to acknowledge is that a huge cross section of our society has been socialized to utilize substances as a norm, whether it be alcohol, whether it be marijuana, whether it be other controlled substances. We're a society that socializes around substances. So now we're quarantined, we're locked in, and people don't have access to their substances. It has been very challenging, to say the least. The government just this week announced that they're reopening bars and restaurants and nightclubs. And, you read on the online news media and people are rejoicing because now I get to drink and smoke and do whatever it is I need to do with my friends. So we are a society of people who have been socialized to believe that altering our consciousness with substances is socially acceptable and socially preferred. So when people now start having challenges, that already established norm becomes the go-to coping mechanism for what is happening. Alcohol, marijuana create an artificial high. It also is a wonderful, if depending on who you're talking to, distraction for you for what's happening in the moment. The problem with marijuana and alcohol is that they're actually interacting with the chemicals in the brain and changing the structures of the brain. So what happens is after you come down from that artificial high, the chemicals in your brain, serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, they're off balance now, they're off kilter. So sometimes, from the majority of people, you actually feel worse after you've come down from the high. And guess what you do now to get away from that feeling worse? You take more of the substance. And before you know it, you're abusing it. And after you've finished abusing it, you become addicted to it and dependent on it. So that is the progression there, unfortunately.
Well, I want to dive a little bit into that because you said that, in terms of substance abuse is usually in a social setting.
It begins. We're indoctrinated to believe that it's socially acceptable to use substances to alter our consciousness.
But then we taught somewhere along the line, I'm not sure where, but that it's okay to drink socially as opposed to drinking by yourself. Is there some kind of difference in the level of impact when you're using substance socially as opposed to when you're using substance by yourself?
No, I think it's the same. I think when you're drinking socially, you're more liable to binge drink. Just like if you were home by yourself and nobody was taking note of how much you were drinking, you're liable to binge drink. I don't think there's a difference between drinking by yourself and drinking publicly. It's all one and the same. You're altering your consciousness. You're probably having more fun if you're out with people, and that reinforces you to come back and seek the substance more because now you correlate the substance with fun and feeling high and feeling jovial and connecting with others. So I as a clinician don't perceive a difference, but for the person who's utilizing substances to get through their day-to-day, they may perceive it differently.
Okay. And it's not effective?
No. So basically what happens is when you use an artificial substance to stimulate a particular consciousness in your body, what happens is the body gets accustomed to it. And so you don't experience the same high. And so you have to keep using more and more of that substance in order to recreate that initial high. And before you know it, whereas 2 drinks could have given you that high before, now you need 10, because the body will adapt. It will adapt its just noticeable difference and keep taking that threshold higher and higher, and you'll require more and more of the substance in order to feel that way.
I want us to shift the conversation a bit in looking at the impact of substance abuse. You mentioned we were here in the pandemic lockdown, whether or not we were able to get to our substance of choice or not, and the impact it had not only on the person using, but their family and especially children. So talk a bit about that impact holistically of substance abuse and mental health issues on a family.
Okay, so if my mother is a substance abuser, I have a 50% chance of growing up to be an abuser myself, because I have seen the behavior modeled and demonstrated for me, and there are a lot of studies out there now talking about the genetic components of substance abuse. So, whatever happens on the cellular level, it predisposes me to having a disposition for addiction and substance abuse. Very often, the children of substance abusers tend to develop mental health challenges in childhood because it's very stressful. Okay, when dad is drunk, for some men they become very violent, abusive. There's a lot of neglect. It's very stressful for the family because they very often end up compensating. So my dad is out on the lawn drunk. He's vomited. I have to go and turn him over so he don't choke and he won't vomit. And me going and turning him over, he might take a swing at me. We're uninhibited when we're high. So we say whatever it is really on our chest. So we say horrible, hateful, mean, damaging things to our children, our spouses. And it doesn't get any better. It gets progressively worse without intervention. The United States did a lot of campaigns in the early 80s on drunk driving, and we really don't see a lot of that anymore in terms of the volume that we used to. But my father was killed by a drunk driver when I was 7 years old. So then there's the danger to the community. You stay at the bar drinking all night, and you get in the car, and then you go and you run down somebody, you run somebody off the road, and you kill them. So substance abuse has lasting implications for the entire community, but more importantly, lost productivity and wages. When you're drunk or high or you hungover, you can't function at work. And these persons tend to lose their jobs, so they become unemployed, which makes them vulnerable for other social ills.
Definitely. And living in a household where there might be one parent with substance abuse issues, mental health issues, what can the other parent do to help, the family cope, to help the children cope in that type of environment?
Well, I would say to the non-abusing spouse, you absolutely have to get help. You absolutely have to get help. A lot of times, particularly here in the Virgin Islands, we believe if we ignore something, it will magically remit, it will work itself out. I've often heard parents with children with learning disabilities or other pervasive developmental disorders say, oh, they'll grow out of it. No, it doesn't work that way. So if you have a spouse who is dependent on or abusing substances, you absolutely have to get help. You have to think about what it was for you as a child to be afraid, and take that feeling and expand it, and then you know how your child feels on a daily basis dealing with the dysfunction of living with a parent who is abusing substances. It's horrifying. It's horrifying.
And in terms of the roles and services of your department, what type of services do you have to offer, and how can persons access your services?
It's so funny you should say that, because I see my substance abuse counselor crossing the street. So at Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services, we provide detox. We provide detoxification for persons who are addicted to substances or abusing substances. We also provide individual group rehabilitative therapy, and we also give people the option of attending rehab facilities overseas. Right now, we're planning in the works a much bigger, more comprehensive service, because I believe that we need to be able to treat our people here, and we need to be able to sustain their sobriety here. And so we're currently right now in the plans of drafting a bigger, even more comprehensive program for the Virgin Islands.
Definitely. And any contact information you'd like to share for persons to get in contact with you?
Absolutely. So when I moved to the BVI in 2003, we didn't have a lot to choose from, but we have a plethora of private and public clinicians that you can access. For my service, our number is 852-7670 or 852-7675. We have a wide range of clinicians. You come in and we will work with you to meet your needs, whatever they are. And of course, we have the Wellness Center, we have Penn's Medical, we have 5 doctors. I mean, we have Therapy to Thrive. So it ain't like long ago when we had nothing. Now we got. And so there is a clinician out there for everyone.
Definitely. And we're encouraging our listening audience, mental health, don't make it sound like it's a negative thing. It's a very positive thing. When you have it, it's beautiful. If you're coming up short a little bit, contact somebody to help keep you balanced.
As I tell people all the time, it is fashionable to be mentally well.
Definitely. Definitely. World Mental Health Day today. Final thoughts.
I am my brother's keeper. So when we see people struggling in the community, when we see people making mistakes, when we see people not living to their fullest potential, we have a moral responsibility to say to them, hey, I love you. I see you trying your best, but I think that you need some help. And if there's anything that I can do to help you get that help, I would be more than happy to assist you.
Wonderful. And don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, your silly TikTok Don't Rush videos. We want to see them. So upload them to your Facebook page and tag our page at BVI HSA. Once again, thank you for tuning in. Please share this video. Please share this information. Mental health, let's be fashionable. Thank you for tuning in.